This live presentation was produced in Ashland, Oregon by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. RVML relies on the support of our volunteers, members, and donors to organize and present these programs. For more information about this presentation, or to borrow, download, or purchase other recordings from our catalog, please visit our website at rvml.org.
How's that in the back? Is that a little clearer than his mic?
That's better, yes.
See, you just need to do more Qigong. I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight, and I'd like to take a moment to thank Jordan and his staff here. A lot of us who live here take advantage of the center here, and when you look at what they have produced over the last 5 years, it's remarkable. I mean, speakers from all over the world, speakers of, really high caliber, and it's just been a tremendous forum, so I really appreciate the amount of consistent effort that's gone into it. I know it hasn't been easy over the years holding it together sometimes, but the results have been well worth it for those of us who live here. And I think you people who came tonight to give your time and your interest in the area of healing. Living in Ashland, of course, healing is an everyday word. It's sort of like I used to live in Santa Fe and Sedona, and it's kind of the same in those places. That's kind of all you hear and all you talk about. There are thousands of practitioners doing absolutely everything, so you have a great choice, and makes one want to get sick just so you can go out and sample the wares of everything that's out there. But as our lovely introductor said tonight, Jordan and he have been after me for about 5 years to give a talk, and every time I looked at this illustrious list of presenters, I went, no, you don't need me, you've got all these great people here. But when he asked me, and certainly when he offered the auspicious date of September 11th, a couple of weeks ago, I couldn't resist, because I do have something that as yet most people don't know about, which I think is really world-shattering. It's got all the components of truly great things in life. It's simple, it's effective, it's consistent, it's life-saving, and just about anybody can do it. So that's a remarkable thing, because part of my work over the years has been trying to find things that are more community-oriented, to kind of take things out of the hands of specialists as much as possible and put them in the hands of the everyday person so they can look after them. And I know a lot of health things that have been developed over the last, especially the last 5 or 10 years have been aiming for that, but a lot of them are a little tricky, and some of them are difficult to learn. And certainly none of them are anywhere within reach of what I'm going to tell you about tonight. So part of my reason for wanting to give a short talk tonight to people was to begin hopefully some energy towards, I would like to see Ashland have a weekly session like you're going to see on a short video clip here, which is called a guinea pig class, where people with terminal diseases can come and be treated free and get great results. And it's not restricted only to those people. Anybody with a problem can come, or anybody who's suffering can come, but originally the classes were designed for that. So that's what we're doing here, and much to our filmer's disgust, when he saw this was my first thing, he had second thoughts about letting me talk tonight. People know what this is? Are we all modern here? How many people know what it is? Put up your hand. Oh my gosh, Ashlanders are more pure than I thought. That's really remarkable. Who can say what this is? Where it's from? Nobody?
Where it's from.
This is from the X-Files. And only the true aficionados know what this is. Every once in a while, the camera would kind of pass by Fox Mulder's door. Remember the guy who did the investigations of things with Scully as partner? And you would catch a glimpse just for a second of this poster on the wall in the corner of his room. And this was the poster. And I always thought it was really cute. And they did it really nicely. It was made up by the audiovisual staff of the movie. They made up this and they made up some other things. But it's actually quite brilliant because they didn't have it out front and center. They just kind of had it so every once in a while you get this little glimpse of it. But the reason why I put it up here tonight is not because we're talking about X-Files kinds of things, but because really most of us as human beings, I think, deep inside want to believe that healing is simple, that healing is easy, that we can do it for ourselves, for our family, for our friends, for our community, that you don't have to be a specialist, you don't have to be a practitioner who's trained for many, many years to be able to offer assistance to yourself and to other people. And yet, if you're like me, who's trained in way too many things, hundreds of things, fairly extensively, and a lot of them were okay. I mean, they had their moments, but they didn't really satisfy this urge, to this really wanting to believe that it was really true. And what we're really after, of course, happens when we're really young. What are we really after? We're really after magic. And to be able to believe in magic. And the great thing is that there is magic out there, and we can access it. And I've been very, very fortunate in most of my life to be able to find that out. As some of you know, I started off rather roughly, grew up in orphanages, and then came to live with a family, and I was given the typical vaccines of the day. And I can remember the day it went in my arm, I felt like molten lava was pouring through my body, and I passed out and was out for hours. And from that day on, life was very tough. A year later, I was put into bed, told I would never walk, I would never get out of bed, ever. And fortunately, being an Aries, the guys upstairs give you some tools, and one of mine was being an Aries. And I was always able to say, I don't think so. So even at age 8, I was able to get up and get going. But it continued on with some pretty severe problems. And then in my teens, I died twice before I was 20. And I had just about every disease known at the time. Was in and out of hospital all the time, and they never knew what was the matter with me. But it was grueling every day, especially from the age of 11. I can remember looking back at my diaries, wake up every morning, 4 o'clock, and say, do I want to live today? Is it worth it? Do I want to do it? Every day for the next 8, 9 years. And then I was laying in the hospital after having died the second time, and they told me, that's it, we don't know what's the matter with you, but you're not probably going to make it. And again, I said, I don't think so. So I said, you must have some medical books in here. And so they gave me all the medical books they had, and I started reading them, and then I went off to medical school, which was one of my bigger disappointments in life. But, it had its moments. And then after receiving kind of that grounding and training, I was very, very fortunate to be picked up by the World Health Organization back in the days when they were the good guys. They aren't anymore. I'll say that openly, even though it's a recording. But back in those days, they had some very interesting programs. And one of them was to take young graduate doctors who had an interest in holistic medicine and take them all over the world and train them. And they had a very interesting little phrase in the little letter that I was given by a doctor friend of mine from the Philippines. It was to train promising young doctors in complementary and alternative medicine to save the developing nations from the ravages of Western medicine. That's pretty subtle, isn't it? So somebody was working for them at that time that they hadn't done a background check on. But it was a great program. We became master homeopaths, and we learned Ayurvedic medicine in India and Chinese medicine in China, learned mind healing with the Russians, learned shamanic healing with the natives in South Africa and in Central America, and many other things, But we became extremely accomplished, and the payback for all of that training was really the great stuff, because you had to put your time into free clinics in major countries like Sri Lanka and India and some in China. And, you work 7 days a week, 20 hours a day for 1 or 2 months at a time. And you had to do that over a number of times depending on your training. And it was incredible because it was kind of my life's dream. I must have been a monk or something in my last life, because I never liked the whole payment thing for providing help for people who were sick. It was always something that I really had trouble with. Well, in the free clinic, you get there at 5:30 in the morning, especially in Sri Lanka, and it's already 120, 125 degrees because you're almost on the equator, and the humidity is 150%. And you go from where you're staying, which were little tiny rooms, I mean really tiny, about this big enough for a bed, but barely room to step on the floor. And you get up and you get in your whites for the hospital, and you go in these little tuk-tuk things that would drive you around. And by the time you got to the hospital, you were as black as those chairs. Your face, your clothes, because everything was diesel and everything was, with the humidity and the smog and everything else. So you get to the hospital, and they'd throw open the back gates of the hospital, because we didn't work inside the hospital. So they'd throw open the back gates of the hospital, and there were people as far as you could see. And you were there until you saw them all. And they came from all over. And hardly any two spoke the same language. You didn't have translators. They just gave you 30 people at a time and said, here. So it was really in the trenches kind of stuff, and it was really kind of great because you had to use all of the tools that they gave you to try and make some headway. But what you really learned was to treat with heart, because that was a real common bond. If you were genuinely able to see them and hear them and feel them, then there was a current flow that started, which made things a lot easier, because they would find some way to, begin to express the important things that they wanted help with. So that was kind of the beginning. And I remember the day that I backed off from and left all vestiges of modern medicine for good. I was reading a book on Paracelsus and came across this line. And for some reason, it brought me to tears. And I've had this line hanging in my office ever since for the last 30 years. The true ground of medicine is love, and the wood for building and for fire should belong to the whole community. It has some very esoteric meanings, but essentially, it's not just what it says, it's the feeling of it. But the main thing for me was always the true ground of medicine is love. That's what it's about, the relief of suffering. And through doing that, turning yourself and discovering your own inner self and developing your own spiritual self through connecting with all the souls that you were working with and operating from a higher level, not just a kind of a gross material level. So that was a very, very inspirational thing for me, which remains the same. Now, ever since the beginning, one of my goals was always, since I was really young, at least 8 years old, was to learn how to heal with my mind and my hands. I really believed I could do that and that I didn't need anything else. And so all of my training that I had with these energetic things, a lot of them started to lead me there, of course. Started off with simple things like Reiki and, Polarity therapy was a really big thing for me. It still is. It's a profound therapy, if any of you have ever had a chance to study it. The work of Randolph Stone. And, he was an amazing man who traveled the world 7 times looking for the secret of healing. What was it behind all the great healings and practices in the world, the Essenes and all these people, Chinese medicine, and of course the answer was energy. And so he developed polarity therapy as kind of a synthesis of a lot of those things, and he had diet and exercise and very specific movements using the current flows in your hands on certain contact points in the body, which are very, very powerful. Very powerful. So these things began to lead me closer to that, and in the last number of years, 4 or 5 years, Qigong has been a big step in that direction for me. Because of course it has to do with developing your own internal energy and being able to, connect your energy with the Qi energy of the cosmos, and to be able to use that circuit of energy to help activate people and balance them. But over the years, really it's been tricky. How many people here are healers or who do some work with healing? Yeah, quite a few of you. If you really look at it, unfortunately, most of the time as healers, the sad thing is that most of the time we're janitors. We're cleaning up the mess, that people have made of themselves, and their interchange with the world is done with it. And it takes a lot of concentration and focus and faith as we go on as healers in the world to be able to do the mundane things that need to be done at that level, because they do need to be done, and yet learn to do it from a higher and higher place so you don't get so dragged down with it. I mean, the early days after treating 10 people a day, I was trashed, just trashed. And that doesn't happen anymore, because you learn that you don't have to take it on, you don't have to, do all those things to be an effective healer. And so even though you learn how to kind of start operating from a higher level, it's still very, very challenging to be able to heal deep suffering. Because as the world changes, the suffering I see now, is really different from the suffering I saw 15, 20 years ago. The number of people who have very serious diseases which cause a great deal of pain are huge. I mean, I used to give the statistics that are not the ones in the paper, but the real statistics about, how many people out of 5 will get certain things. I don't do it anymore because it's just, the statistics are abysmal. They're really nasty. And so anybody who looks at those things knows that really ought to be thinking about doing something, to strengthen yourself as opposed to just sitting back and kind of taking a lot of things in the face. And so every year, we as healers, we expose ourselves to great teachers, and we're very fortunate, as I said here, to have that kind of thing. Great patients. The harder patients are the really great teachers. And, of course, our own personal suffering, all these things hone our skills. And yet, a lot of you, I'm sure, like me, still have that yearning for that access to be able to do more and to be able to help those who really need it. And so our accumulative tools have been pretty good, but so many people I see, and I can do a lot. I mean, I can do a lot that very few people can do with very sick people. But there's a lot of people that I can't do anything with, at least up until this time. And especially people who are undergoing some of the new chemos and radiation, because some of the new chemotherapies are so destructive to life that you're not allowed to have real water, real food, everything has to be canned and sterilized because any little germ, can really push a person very far. So our old strategy of packing those cells with nutrition and doing those things so people could stand the onslaught of that, are getting more challenging. So you can imagine my response when I heard that there was a therapy out there that kind of answered the call of what I've been looking for and that didn't have any downsides for me. You didn't have to have people on certain products for the rest of their life. You didn't have to have any restrictions because of whatever therapy they were having. It didn't matter. The results were consistent, and you could go after the very, very, very worst things at almost every level. The name of this particular healing technique is called Tong Ren, and everybody always says, who? So, Tong Ren therapy. Easy to understand. Tong in Chinese is bronze, Ren is doll. The old acupuncture dolls 500 years ago when they were first made were made of bronze, with the acupuncture points on them for instruction. And even though they're made out of plastic, they're still called Tong Ren dolls. The therapy was developed by an amazing man by the name of Tom Tam. That's like somebody made it up, right? I mean, it's an unusual name, Tom Tam. Tom Tam came here in 1975 as a political refugee and stayed here ever since. And he's one of the giants. And I know a lot of you have, in your searchings, have come across these people. There are people on this planet that don't have any official, stuff that do amazingly great things. Well, Tom's one of those people. Yes, he's trained in acupuncture. Yes, he's trained in Tai Chi. He has one of the oldest, most profound masters in Tai Chi, has been his teacher for 30 years. Yes, he's been well trained in Qigong. However, he didn't go to school. They didn't have school during the Cultural Revolution in his part of China. And so it was just his drive as a human being and his constantly asking questions about things that led him to develop this remarkable healing outgrowth of some existing things. Tong Ren is a combination of traditional Chinese medicine, but mainly one old part of it. And along with that, Western anatomy and physiology and chiropractic theory. A blend of those three things. Very unlikely kind of blend. What Tom discovered after, thousands and thousands and thousands of people in deep questioning and trying things out was the old stuff by this old part of the Chinese medicine was called Huatuo Jiaji, and it was after Dr. Huatuo, who was alive 2,000 years ago. He was one of the first people to use anesthetic in surgeries, and he did some profound writing, sort of like our Paracelsus kind of guy. But as in China, as here, and many other places, he was a little too good. And so he was put to death and his books were burned. And so there was very little to go on. And although Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine still uses the name in their studies, as anybody who really looks into it will tell you, you try and follow it and it's kind of nothing there. It just disappears. The real details of what you want to know aren't there because a lot of it was lost. Well, he got on the trail of this and started working it out with a few clues that were there. And Huatuo Jiaji means the treatment of the spinal thing. That's why he connected it with our chiropractic theory. and treating both sides of the spine. And what he found is that, of course, in its simplicity, going beyond, we first start to get sick when we separate from unity, right? Whatever that means to us in our particular spiritual persuasions. But when we get down into the physical plane, the blockages are, the diseases are caused by blockages in flow. That simple. Blockages in flow of chi or energy through the body creates problems, aberrations and patterns of flow, and that affects the organs, affects muscles, glands, and so on. And so, depending on our genetic makeup, our little deck of cards that we're dealt, we'll get sick when there's blockages. Well, he was able to figure out all the blockages for the causal patterns for those diseases in the spine. And you probably, that's right. See, I thought it was magic, but still have limitations. On the left are his points and what they're used for, and over here is the chiropractic system and the acupuncture system. So you'll see some commonalities and overlaps, but quite a few really different things. So based on that whole concept of blockages, Tom Tam developed a thing called the Tom Tam Healing System, just so he wouldn't forget who did it. And it's really quite remarkable. He uses acupuncture, he uses Tui Na, which is an acupuncture special massage thing, and he uses Qigong, but the main thing is the Tong Ren. So how does he do that, and why is it so remarkable? Well, let's take a look at let's hope they gave me one of those. When you train with Tom, when he's training doctors, it's really funny because, he talks about his theory, he talks about everything, and so, everybody's saying, yes, I can understand that. And then he hands out his textbook, which is called A Lazy Bum's Guide to Healing. And it's pretty interesting. I've seen people walk out at that point. But the reason why he calls his book that is because if you read the little sheet that advertised this thing, it muttered something about healing for the whole community. Tom Tam wanted to create a system that was exactly what we were talking about before, that anybody had access to, anybody could learn, families could learn, and be highly effective at. And so, quite by accident, he came across a book by Carl Jung. Now, you're talking about a guy who didn't have any education, didn't go to university, didn't study philosophy, didn't study psychology. And he reads this book by Carl Jung on the collective unconscious. And he goes, bingo, I can use this. So what he did was he developed this system, puts it up there in the collective unconscious, so everybody has access to it. And the more people that use the system, the stronger that paradigm gets in the collective unconscious. It's a little bit tricky to understand, but bear with me here. In the beginning, he and I were talking when I was training with him. He said, like 5 years ago, the best practitioners were people like myself, who had a lot of strong mental control, who had a lot of understanding of the theoretics of it, and you could kind of emotionally get out of the way and, you know, really, really focus. But now, anybody in this room could, on their very first day, get results. Because this thing is anchored in the collective unconscious, which we all share, and that energy is fed from, we won't get into too many names because everybody has different names for it, but you know, from superconsciousness or whatever you want to call it. That energy feeds into that commonly shared mental area. And so the chi flows into that and we can access it for healing, which makes it very different. Because in Qigong, like Qigong masters treat from the stored up energy, you know, in their Dantian. And so there's a limit. Not for some. I've seen a few who could just like do thousands at a time. But for the average person, it has to do with how much energy you have as to how much you can put out. But you don't have to really put out energy with this system because the energy is fed from the unconscious to you. And all you have to do is do it. How about that? And that's the trick. A lot of the therapies I've learned in the past, the shibboleth, you know what a shibboleth is? It's an old Hebrew term. It was like when the tribes were all out there milling around and somebody came across the hill, you would ask them to say certain words to see whether they belonged to your tribe or not. Because only people that belong to your tribe could say those things or pronounce them. So it's kind of a trick thing. And in a lot of the healing systems, the shibboleth to getting to the magic was sometimes very tricky. Very, very hard. Seemed easy, but very, very difficult to actually make it effective. Tong Ren is anything but that. You just do it. You pick it up and you do it. So, I tried to find a stuffed cat today so I could show I was letting the cat out of the bag. But you can tell I'm a Canadian. Canadians have really down-to-earth humor. So this is the Tong Ren system. Remember Maxwell's silver hammer? There it is. It's a magnetic hammer. The points on it are magnetically charged, partially because it's an old Chinese thing. If you tap certain points in the body with a magnetic hammer, it releases and opens a lot easier. And so Tom took that idea when he developed this system. So here we have the Tong Ren doll, hence Tong Ren therapy. And the doll is just the image for the person or persons being treated. Now, the first thing that comes up is, oh, that looks like something I read about in Louisiana before the government got rid of Louisiana. Sorry. Called voodoo, right? Voodoo is very real. I mean, I've seen and trained with people. I mean, it's very real. And some of the difficulties with voodoo is you can use it for good or you could use it for other things. This system, Tom says, I don't care how malicious somebody is, they cannot hurt somebody with this system because the concept of the system, which is what makes everything work, even voodoo, is that there are blockages which you are trying to open. So all you can do with this system is open blockages. So little Johnny picks up the doll off the floor and goes, Mommy, I can do what you do. She's not going to fall down the floor in a coma. She's going to go, well, thank you, Johnny. That feels a lot better. Do you understand what I'm saying? It can only be used for opening. Because it can only be used for opening and because of the way the system is, you also can't do anything wrong. There's a lot of systems out there that work with energy where if you don't do things in the right order, you can make people kind of sick. And you can make things really topsy-turvy. But the genius of his system is that you are never going to do that. If you hit the wrong points in the wrong order, All that's going to happen is you're going to open up points, but you're not going to suffer some untoward events because of that. So here he has, this is an example of his Lazy Bum's Guide to Healing. And you can take an area like, what should we pick? Pick one. Alzheimer's.
If it's going to cure everybody of any possibilities.
Alzheimer's. We notice that under the main points on this chart are points that you really have to use. They're the points that the blockages are really key blockages. The support points are going to make the healing go better, but you could do without. Having used this for an awful lot of people, I wouldn't suggest skipping these because they make a big difference. But on Alzheimer's, a good example of it is, I guess I can move a little bit, all these points up to here are all points in the neck and the head. And this is part of Tom's genius, especially with things to do with the brain. I mean, honestly, despite all the things that I have, yes, with Qigong I could do some things, very difficult to get in and normalize pituitary, pineal gland, motor cortex, hypothalamus, cerebellum. Very difficult to get in there because there's a blockage there. Very difficult. And so energy things you can do, you can get in there a bit. Tom's genius is that things that go imbalanced in the brain are very simple. His favorite line for every doctor, which I'm sure causes them sleepless nights, they go, well, what about this? And he goes, piece of cake. What about AIDS? Piece of cake. Right? What about brain tumors? Inoperable brain tumors. Piece of cake. What he means by that is this is where the benefit of him matching this up with certain elements from Western anatomy and physiology. But even though he's done that, Western anatomy and physiology doesn't always appreciate what it's got and what it knows, and it doesn't really follow it. So his genius is that if you open the blood flow up into the brain, that supports and opens the nerve flow. And if you balance those two things, almost everything will correct itself. Piece of cake. So that's why you find with things like the Alzheimer's is all those first points have to do with opening up any blockages in the major blood flow arteries up into the brain. So a lot of his treatments where you're going to be balancing certain things in the brain, you just tap like this in a certain order, and we tap from the bottom up towards the brain because we're trying to open things up towards the brain. But nothing's very specific. You watch Tom in a group, and he has everybody treating somebody in the hospital and says, okay, now we're going to work on thoracic 7. So everybody's working on thoracic 7, and then pretty soon, and you're going, Tom, that's not thoracic 7. Everybody else is still, sitting here. The intention is almost all that's needed. I'll jump right to the finish line and tell you that he told me that anybody that practices regularly for over a year or so will get to the point where they don't even need the doll and the hammer. That because they understand the process, they think of the person and the problem, and that makes a connection with the collective unconscious, and bing, it's done. Or you could visualize it being done, and it's done. But he asks all practitioners, no matter how advanced, for the first year to do the nitty-gritty work like this because it strengthens that paradigm in the collective unconscious so that people like you, if you want to learn it, can pick it up and have good results right away. So, you open up the blood flow up into the brain, and then there are very, very specific points for opening up both sides of the brain so they work together and opening up the hypothalamus and motor cortex and memory centers and all of these kind of things. So you can see why he says piece of cake. It's in alphabetical order, and you just treat the points in order. And in the book, there are pictures to show you where the points are. You know, so if you're not an acupuncturist, it doesn't matter. You just look at the picture and go, oh yeah. And then after you've done it 4 or 5 times, you remember where those points are. Now, why am I so excited about this? Well, when I took my training with Tom in the hospital in Denver, Colorado, he lectured for a couple of hours, and then he asked one of the doctors to bring somebody in that they hadn't been able to do anything with. And this was a big hospital in Denver, big teaching research hospital. And they brought a doctor in who had a head-on car crash and was totally paralyzed. And, you know, he was in bad state. I mean, his wife said 20 hours a day, you know, whatever noise he could make, he would make it because he was in pain and he was suffering. And so they wheeled him in, they put him down there, and Tom started working on him, explaining what he was doing, opening up all the, you know, blood flow to the brain, and which was feeding the nerve flow to the brain. And then he worked on the pituitary and the pineal gland and the motor cortex and the hypothalamus and some various other things for about 10 minutes. And he goes, so doc, can you move your right arm? And you could just see his eyes narrow as much as they could. You could just imagine what he was thinking, you know, are you dumb? Do you know what my condition is? And he goes, like this. Can you move your left arm? Could move his left arm, or could move his hand a little bit. Can you move your head? This is somebody only eyelids could move. Feeding tubes or eating, everything else. Next morning, this man woke up and he could speak. 1 10-minute treatment. Next patient, fellow with advanced Parkinson's. After 10 minutes, 70% relieved. Third case, hospital worker at the hospital who had polio 40 years earlier and had to use a walker. Pretty extensive walker, not just a simple little thing. And after 10 minutes, she could walk in the room. Yeah, she had a big, you know, drag on that leg on that side, but she could walk. And it went on like this, on and on and on. And so we saw, you know, some remarkable things, and you sort of go, wow, yeah, that's Tom, you know, he's got a gift. And he kept saying, no, you know, you don't understand. This is easy, anybody. It's set up for you. Anybody can do it. So I came home, and the first patient that I had was somebody who's had stage 4 breast cancer for the last 20 years. And her husband and I, over the last 5 years, have done a lot to kind of keep her pretty okay. But the damage to her body was pretty extreme, and it did spread into her bones. And she got to the point where, of course, the pain was insurmountable. Insurmountable. She just wanted to jump off the, you know, the back banister. And she said, can you do anything with the new thing you learned? So I thought, wow. So I looked up on my little sheet, got a section there for cancer, points for breast cancer. She's on the phone, and I'm tapping away. And I said, do you feel anything yet? She goes, yeah, I'm all warm. I feel this energy running through my body. We got through the 10 minutes. She said, I don't have any pain. And I went, you sure? She said, no, I don't have any pain. She was free for 12 hours at a time. I treated her twice a day. No drugs, no pain, able to sleep. Now, the wonderful thing about this is, of course, not having to take heavy narcotics and things which are really destroying your body. The other thing about opening up all of these areas in here and opening up the hypothalamus is it relieves a lot of fear and a lot of other things. And so the person becomes very happy and content for the first time in a long time. So she was my first case. And the second case was a little girl who belonged to one of our workers in the restaurant. And she's 3 years old, and when she brought her into my office a couple of months ago, she weighed barely 18 pounds. She was about this tall. Her legs were about as big round as my thumb. She'd been in and out of hospital because, Children's Aid kept taking her away. If you know anything about Mexican mothers, it's not because she wasn't taking care of them. I mean, she's got a lot of kids and she's very loving, but something was wrong, but they could not find it, even though they went after everything they could think of for her. So I talked to Tom, and Tom was kind of mad about the call because he said, has something happened to your brain since you were in class? I'm like, no, and he goes, it's a piece of cake. If she won't eat, which she wouldn't from the day she was born, she would not eat. Even feeding tube, she would throw it up. An intravenous, she'd throw it up. What governs desires in the body? Food, drink, sex, everything else. Hypothalamus. Wow. She's not growing, not thriving, so human growth hormone, right? So you just go through the various things and say, okay. So her mother brought her in. She was sitting there in front of my desk, and she either was always in her mother's arms or always laying on the couch. She never moved or walked or did anything. So she's sitting there, and I'm, opening up these points first, right? Get all the blood flow up into the head and the nerves, and then you open up the pituitary gland for the human growth hormone and balance out the hypothalamus. And, I'm 5 minutes into tapping, and all of a sudden, she wakes up, squirms, gets down, starts running around my office. And her mother kind of looks at her, and her big brother is looking at her, and she's running around all over the place. So finished the treatment, lots of color in her face. She went from being very, very pale to lots of color. I got a call on their way home from the son because the mother was crying too hard to speak. The little girl had demanded that they go home and put on a big pot of potatoes and vegetables. Some of you hasn't eaten, right, since they were born. She went home and she ate 3 big helpings. And she's been eating 4 and 5 times a day. Balanced foods, like she wants fruits and vegetables and meats. And she's eating 4 and 5 times a day, and she is really growing. And she's become a live wire. And someday, before I get too old, I learn how to do those point presentations. We could have a little photograph of her, because you wouldn't believe the picture that we took the first day and what she looks like now. But that initial thing, I treated her for 10 minutes, ABC points, and then treated her once every 2 weeks. 10-minute treatment. Whenever it would sort of start to slip, when she was saying, I'm not really hungry, and give her a little treatment, she'd get back and start to do it. It was very interesting in the hospital. I was very proud of most of the doctors because, trust me, when you go through medical training, you've got all that money invested, and you've been browbeaten for all those years, and you finally climb up to where you're, king of the hill, and you've got insurance and everything. This is a really hard concept to entertain. So to have a room full of 50 doctors sitting and doing this was pretty amazing to me. But the guy beside me got up and left at the last thing we did. He said, count me out. And he got up and he left. And that was after he could handle all these things, the paralyzed guy and all these things happening. Last question of the training. Can you use this for weight loss? Last year, what? $6 billion industry, right? Piece of cake. Open up the blood flow into the brain. Fat is eaten by leptin, right? They now try and inject it into areas of fat in the body. It doesn't work very well because that's not how it's designed to work. So you treat, pituitary gland, human growth hormone, you get the leptin produced, then you treat the motor cortex and everything, get that stuff out there and working. So Tom's kind of an irreverent kind of guy. And he said, wow, we're in luck. We're in a hospital. They only hire fat people. That's what he says. So he sent one of the doctors off to get somebody. They brought back this woman from radiology who was about 4 feet and 310 pounds, this black woman. And she came in. He says, would you like to lose some weight? Well, she let him have it between the eyes, I've done this and I've done that and nothing works and don't mess around with me, honky. And really, she let him have it big time. And so he just stood his ground and he says, no, I mean it. Would you like to lose some weight right here, right now? Not tomorrow, but right here, right now. Said, you're getting paid for this break. She says, okay. So he sent her over to the nurse. She got weighed. They weighed the top of her hips and marked it with tape where they marked it, and they measured her waist. And then they weighed her again just to make sure. And he did his little thing, manufacture of leptin, get it out there, get it working through the body, working through specific points in here which cause the body to start kind of, tightening and pulling things in. 10 minutes, send her back over there, 7 pounds. 1.5 inches off the top of each leg and almost 3 inches off her waist. Wow. That's when the doctor said, count me out. Because, from his point of view, that's really getting into weird stuff. But it's not really. I mean, if you weigh yourself before you go to bed at night, the average person, there are some people who gain weight sleeping. But the average person, you weigh, very carefully, totally nude before you go to sleep, and weigh in the morning, you're lighter. You dissipate energy and matter, as a part of your functioning. So it's not that weird, and all he's doing is accelerating it. So he did that, and it was kind of neat. I've got 2 minutes, right? So actually, the very first thing I did when I got home, my wife has seen me go through thousands of these things, and so I come in after being away on our only day off, and she says, so what did you learn? And so I said, wow, this is really great. She says, yeah, it's always really great. Anything practical? And I thought, weight loss. Every woman, no matter how thin, right, has got a pair of jeans in the closet that they shouldn't be wearing, but they really want to wear. And it doesn't mean they're heavy, right? So I said, yeah, we learned a thing for weight loss, and it's like it can happen immediately. Sure enough, she ran upstairs, came back down with this pair of jeans. And she could sort of get them up, and she could do the bottom button, but she could not do the top 2 buttons. There was no way that was happening. So I said, well, sit down, just close your eyes and relax, and, get all the points, right? No incense, no special mantras, right? No special breathing techniques, just do it. So I do the points with confidence, even though it's my wife. Which is very important. You sit there and go, oh my God, what if it doesn't work? No, you just do it. Did the points. She stands up, buttons up her pants, and I could take my hand and put it in between, here and her waist. And there was a little bit of room at the top of the thighs. It was no longer stretchy tight. So that was how I justified my being away and spending money. So we're going to take a little break. And then afterwards, I'm going to show just a very short clip of Dr. Tam running one of his little things so you can see what he's like. And then we'll have some questions and things like that. Okay. At the break, a couple of questions came up, which I wanted to address. Until you actually do this with yourself or with family, you can't understand the excitement of what the potential of this is. And one of the big potentials is that even with all the skills that I had, let's take breast cancer. If 10 women came in my office before I learned this with breast cancer before, at least 8 of those people would get different treatments. The treatments were very individualized, which is a problem. I mean, I've treated well over 100,000 people in the last 30 years, one by one by one. It's a slow way. With this method, when Dr. Tam runs the guinea pig classes, which he calls them because when he first started, he wanted guinea pigs to come and see what would happen. And it works so well that the Chinese believe when you get something that works really well, you don't change the name. So 6 years later, they're still called guinea pig classes, meaning people come to see what will happen. So he can treat 60 to 100 people easily in an hour, by lining them all up, and especially if he groups them into conditions. Now, imagine the potentials. In Africa already, in some of the clinics, you can have 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 people with AIDS come in the evening outside the clinic and sit down. And the doctors and nurses can treat them all in 10 minutes. And they're getting good results. You could treat a stadium full of people with a condition all at one time. So anybody who's got a creative mind can sort of get a glimpse of the potentials of where this kind of thing could go. But for a practitioner, it's really quite remarkable. And it's one of the reasons why I would like to, get enough interest going that eventually we have a, once a week class where those people who need it can come and free and be treated. Because one of the other nice things about this kind of therapy, and that's one of the ways the test for me is whether this is a good therapy. There are therapies out there that work, and I won't mention any names, but it's not that they don't work, but just because something works doesn't mean you should do it. You really, if you're going to be a good healer, you want to be sensitive to whether something is correct. Meaning, is it spiritually ethical? Is it morally ethical? Is it, fostering ego growth versus healing of somebody or whatever? You develop the tools you need to be able to ascertain with the things you learn, is this something that's good? One of the most remarkable things about people say, well, don't you get tired if you're, treating 20 or 30 people a day? And I say, no, I'm actually a lot better afterwards. Now, anybody who understands energy understands why. The reciprocal energy field that I'm exposed to treats my points too. So at the end of the day, the only time that was different was in the hospital training. We treated a lot of people, and we got treated, and we were treating ourselves. So we probably had about 85 treatments a day. And I woke up the next morning and wanted to die so badly, because every system in my body was detoxing, and, but the next day I felt phenomenal. I felt really good, but that was the only time. Generally, there are people here I know that even with me tapping on the doll, just on those general points, could feel the energy in their body. You can feel the energy starting to flow. So it's very good because it's good for you. It's good for everybody. You know, I have people who come in, a husband brings his wife who's got cancer, he's sitting there, we do the treatment, and all of a sudden his face opens and the hardness leaves and he's smiling and he says, wow, I feel so relaxed and I feel so good. You know, he's in the energy field, so everything benefits from that. So it's quite good. I think that was the main question. You can treat at a distance with this. You can treat over the telephone or the baby, for instance, in the hospital across the country. It didn't matter. What matters is that you always have permission. Dr. Tam always asks people, even that come to the healing circle, do I have your permission for me to treat you? Because some people get in that field and something in them says, oh, this is spooky, I can't deal with this. So he always asks, are you okay with that? And he says, fine, that's great, you can sit here, you can go do whatever. So you always get permission from people. You never just kind of think up all your friends, oh, my friend could lose a little bit of weight. Oh, he could really change his temperament a little bit. No. That falls into the little rabbit foo-foo category. You know, a little rabbit foo-foo running through the forest, scooping up the field mice, popping them on the head. Some of you are young enough to remember that. So you always ask permission, and some people, some of my patients, it's important for them just because of the people they are, at least for the first 2 or 3 times they come in the office. So they see what I'm doing, and they experience it. And then when we do it on the phone, which is the next step, you know, of loosening the apron strings, we do it on the phone. They call me at a set time, and they hear the tapping, and they know what I'm doing, and they go, oh, yeah, oh, I'm feeling relaxed, and it's working. And then, you know, you can get to the point where you don't even have to do that. You just set times. I'm going to treat you Tuesdays and Thursdays at this time. And it's great, and it works. One of my big joys when I got back was a friend of mine who developed very rapid onset MS. And she's been deteriorating pretty fast, and so I started treating her when I got back, and she started feeling it right away. I mean, she almost lost her voice, and her voice would come back to normal, and strength would come back. And she phoned me one day, because I'd set times for her, but she didn't know what the set times were. And she phoned me one day, and she said, did you just treat me? And I said, why? She said, well, I've been feeling so good for the first time in 6 months I went out of the house with a girlfriend of mine. She took me to a restaurant. And I had my walker and everything, and I had to go to the bathroom, and I got up from the table, and it was a long way to the bathroom, and even with her help, I couldn't do it. I was so weak, I just couldn't do it. And she said, all of a sudden this energy poured through my body, and I was able to stand up and walk on my own to the bathroom and back. And it was exactly when she was getting the treatment. So it's very, you know, it's really a very remarkable kind of thing, especially being so easy, being so simple. The basic accoutrements are the hammer, the doll, the workbook, which has all the, you know, points in it and all the various diseases and things, and this handy-dandy Chinese laser. You know it's a Chinese laser because it says 90-degree. Something happens in the translation. It doesn't really work. But the laser is a remarkable thing. Only Tom Tam could have thought of this, I'm telling you. Use this when you have pains that you don't know of or points that need to be treated over a period of time. I had a lady the other week that came in. She'd had abdominal surgery about 6 months ago. Ever since her surgery, she had a lot of pain. She went back, they checked her out, couldn't find anything. But I mean, really disturbing pain, 24 hours a day. I didn't know what to do. So while she's sitting in the office, Dr. Tam says, get a case like that, put the laser on it. We're sitting there talking, and all of a sudden she goes, it's going. It's gone. And it never came back. Isn't that wild? But it's very good for treating points like people with asthma, very specific points that you use. You can leave them on for 15, 20 minutes. So this little carpenter's level, even though it isn't 90 degrees, is a very handy tool. So those 4 things, that's the healing system. $20, $20, $25. It's $100 for all 4 things. He could charge $10 million for what this is. I'm just so impressed. So that's the healing system. So I do have some sheets to leave for people at the end that if you're interested in maybe ever training or something, because they're in Boston, and to bring them all the way out here is a very expensive ordeal. So we have to have a pretty good group of people. But I'm starting to collect names. For people who want to start learning some simple things right now, I will be doing some short courses like this Saturday. I'm doing a small course for some patients that really need to get started right away, and a couple of practitioners who are coming in. It'll just be a Saturday thing, but it'll be quite ample, for them to go home and do it. I mean, you can get very sophisticated with this therapy. Very sophisticated. Or you can stay very simple and do a lot of good. So at the end of Saturday, those people will be able to do almost anything, really. Because you can't miss. Alphabetical order, do the points. All they need to do is to have some, to do enough of it and to feel it and to see it, and so that they can go home with confidence and know that they're going to be doing something good. So, so the main things about the thing, I just want to remind people, the thing about the Tong Ren is that it has a much wider healing range and much faster results. When you can take pain, I have a new patient 2 days ago who's had advanced cancer for 2 years, and even with heavy narcotics, the pain is almost life-threatening. And her husband said to me, and she's lost the use of her urine and everything because, it's a cervical thing and it surrounded her ureter. And her husband said she has not even, out of the corner of her mouth, cracked a semblance of a smile in over 2 years because her pain is so horrendous. 10 minutes on narcotics. That's hard to do. I don't know any other system that will get behind that. With all narcotics she's on, this big smile comes over her face. Her husband cries. He hasn't seen her smile for 2 years. And the pain just went. She is averaging 9 to 12 hours without pain a day. I'm treating her twice a day. Just that is huge. And her urinary system is starting to return to normal. So we'll see. You can't promise anything because everybody's different. Some people, remarkable things, other people it's slow. And some people, those blockages we talked about on the back, if you're not getting results, you have to see them in person or send them to somebody and say, you've got to work out the blockage, on the right side of T4 or whatever it is, because as long as that block won't let go, they'll burn up the energy and just keep burning it up, and it'll never heal. It'll just give them a lot of relief. But a lot of relief to have somebody say, not only am I out of pain, but I'm happy today. I feel good. That's a big thing. So a great tool. And so I'll leave a list, and if you're interested in learning more about it, you can do that. If you want to go to, I forgot to mark it on the sheets, you can go to just tomtam.com or tongrenhealing.com, and you can find your way in there. There are places where you can order the things for yourself, the books, and you know, the worst that happens is we have little classes, you know, where I get 20 people who bought a thing and go, could we have a little class? And we, you know, do a morning here and there, whatever, just to, you know, make it usable for you. But I'm kind of in a rush to get it going because something very big is happening and very unusual. He is averaging 95% on stage 4 cancer cures and around 90 to 92 on AIDS. Nobody in the world's doing that. Not even Oral Roberts did that. It's insane. Because his first patient happened to be somebody at Harvard Medical Research Center with terminal lung cancer who got better and is still better 6 years later. That's what started it all. Dana-Farber, you know, the big cancer research people, and Harvard Medical Research Center are doing a joint research thing on him. And they're doing it because they've seen the results. And that's good and bad. And I warned Tom about this. The real downside to that kind of thing is they do a really good research thing, a really good paper, and they present it to the authorities, and the authorities go, this is a medical technology. Only doctors can do this. So that's the kind of case where you want, you know, 50,000 people out there going, you know, because really, it could happen when they see how good it is. So it's a risk. So the more people are doing it, I think the better. So I encourage everybody to at least consider it. Any questions? Yes.
You mentioned 90, 95% success.
Right.
What are the characteristics of the people that don't respond? Is there any common denominator?
I've got one. And I'm sorry about that. Thank you. He said, are there any common denominators for the people who don't get better? And I don't know yet because I haven't treated enough. I mean, I treat a lot of people, but not enough to, and we're keeping really good records on everybody we treat. The one or two that aren't getting better have both had their stage 4 cancer for 10, 15, 20 years. So it's done a lot of damage. So even though they're alive, I mean, you know, the one woman, I can take my arm and put it right through her body. I mean, it's eaten a hole right through to her spine. I mean, there's a lot of damage, and I can keep her out of pain, but she doesn't seem to be healing. Whereas, you know, some other people in the very first guinea pig sessions, breast tumors shrink remarkably. So I think some of it has to do with how long it's been there, how much underlying damage is done, whether it's metastasized. But, you know, even people with are kind of really down and out have really shocked people in how they've responded. So I can't really answer the question yet. Yes?
How intense does your focus have to be?
Very good question. My focus is, hi Mary, how are you feeling today? Whether she's in person or on the phone, or the baby, all I did was say, this is for Madison, you know, and her last name, you know, we're going to work on this, you know.
You just establish the basic intent, and then you let it go.
Exactly. Very fast, very immediate. No heavy concentration, because then you're using your conscious mind, and you're out of the loop of the collective unconscious. Very good question, yeah. Yes?
When you were doing something, I'm trying to remember now. When you were doing the first time you tapped the dog.
Yes.
After we came back, listening to your voice, listening to your presentation, puts me into such a relaxed state. And it's not real easy for me to relax, especially when it's morning.
Yes.
What you were doing a little while ago. I have severe disc degeneration in my neck. And no, I'm not in extreme pain, but I have a high pain tolerance.
Yes.
Take myself away by doing things that give me joy.
Right.
But I felt this, the thing, the red thing. I felt a zing in my neck.
The laser, yes.
Yes, the laser, thank
Yes.
you. The zing in my
Yes.
fantastic. I mean, I literally, like, I almost giggled, but I was wanting to hear you, so, you know.
Yeah, so what she's saying is that, even though I was, demonstrating for theory point of view, she was able to experience it in her body. And it's true, if we were talking about low back pain, and I happen to be doing this, everybody in here who had some lower back pain would get some assistance from it.
Thank you.
So you're welcome, yes.
Yes, I'm rather left-brained, and I would want to learn all those, points and all of that.
Well, you could do that.
So how long does that take?
Depends on whether you know a lot of acupuncture and a lot of chiropractic and a lot of... But not really. I mean, his basic theory is very easy to learn because it's sort of like a Macintosh. Most things in a Macintosh, if you don't know how to do it, you say, I wonder how this should work, and you try it, and it generally works that way. Well, his system is like that. It's very kind of matter of fact, and you learn some basic anatomy and physiology as to how things work, and then you treat the things that affect those things,
How many points total, just for...
There are probably about 25 major points that affect 90% of the treatments. Yeah. Open up the neck, the brain points, liver points. The thoracic 1, 2, 3, 4, and 7 are all the immune system points. These are all the, reproductive organs and the urinary things. And, it's, after you've done them 3 or 4 times, you go, oh, wow, I get that. And so then you get if something's not on the list, right? Like bilirubin and high bilirubin count and jaundice wasn't on the list. So what do you think you treat? Liver, gallbladder. And so you know what points after you've done it for a while affect those, so you just go there. So it's remarkably simple.
Well, are, people who don't have medical degrees, I guess they would just do it on their family or some friends, because obviously you want to get in trouble when you want to open a practice.
Trouble? That's the most fun in life. Yes.
I have a question about, okay, this is like a sort of a left-brain question, but why the doll? Why don't you actually do it on the people? Could you do it on people?
You can do the hammer on the points on the people. It doesn't work as well as the doll because you're operating with that powerful paradigm set up in the collective unconscious. It's being fed with that amount of energy. And as thousands more people practice it, it is getting so big that his top instructor now on certain kinds of things, you get a feel for anything you do, any therapy you do. You say, oh, okay, this kind of condition, this is going to take, 10 times and, 10, 15 minutes each time. Went from 3 or 4 weeks or a month or 2 months to 2 sessions. That's how it's speeding up as more and more and more people are using it and strengthening that. And conversely, it makes you think about what we're doing as people, but what else we're putting in that little amplifier box called the collective unconscious. It's a very important learning thing because we share that with a lot of other people, and people wonder why they feel a lot of things now they didn't feel a long time ago. Well, you can't take, 350 people suffering a horrible death from starvation every day in Africa and think that isn't hitting your astral plane. And think that isn't hitting your collective unconscious experience. Those things are. And so it's great that people like Tom Tam are putting these positive, constructive things in there to be used, for the betterment of people.
So it seems like the next thing, if you could do it on a doll, you could do it in your mind.
Yes.
You could do it on, okay,
I said earlier that he said after a year or so, the average person doesn't even need the doll anymore. Because once they're fluid and they've got it and they know how it works, then they can do it. Pardon?
You image the doll?
Yeah, you can image the doll or image the person or whatever works best for you.
No, I mean, without the doll, if you practice without the
Right,
doll.
I understand.
Okay.
You could use the doll or the person. Whatever works best for you. Some people would rather try and picture the person. If you don't know the person, it's easier to picture your Tong Ren doll. Yes?
So you open, what stops, like you open the blockage, what stops it from closing up? Like, what is the healing process? Does that
Well, then we're getting back into those questions that keep us all awake. You know, because as I mentioned earlier, from my point of view, we start to get sick when we separate from unity, whatever that means. But like in cancer, Dr. Tam suggests that even when people are cured, and he doesn't say you're cured now. He is a very practical guy. Only medical tests are acceptable by him for whatever your condition is. And even when they say you're all clear, everything's great, he still suggests you be treated once a month to keep it clear and clean. Because you don't know sometimes what little thread of energy somewhere is causing that imbalance. Whether it's sleeping under a ridge in your ceiling that's running over your bed, or, and cutting you in half, or, it could be any number of things. Maybe your dog thinks bad thoughts of you when it's sleeping because it didn't get its bone you promised. Who knows, right? So he suggests that you kind of keep it going, or that you get it all and you treat your people in your family, which makes sense. And people complain about that, and it's weird. I mean, people complain. I've had people complain that are spending thousands a month on their narcotics and throwing up every minute of their life. They're complaining about $100 a month for treatment. And you sort of go, people are weird. So all kinds of things can cause those blockages. And some people, they close up fast. If it's something in their environment, their husband or their wife or whatever, if it's something in your environment that's constantly creating the block, then you have to find some way of dealing with it. Anything else? Yes.
What about animals?
Yes.
Dogs?
Yes, of course. Butterflies, trees.
Do you have to have
Yeah, but Tom Ren,
a dog
dog.
for a cat or a dog?
I don't know how they do that yet. Because I haven't been involved with that, but I'm interested because I've treated a lot of animals, over my career, and they're really remarkable to treat. So I don't know how they do it. But I would imagine that they've got acupuncture dolls for animals.
They have them for horses.
Yes, I know horses,
You probably could use that same map.
and I've seen one for pigs,
do for dogs?
and dogs I've seen.
But
So,
you could just transpose the points in a visual image.
Right.
That you would do.
right. I just don't know what the details are, but I will find out.
Because the physiology is pretty much the same.
Yes. Yes.
Do you think that when you open the points, that which has been causing the blockage, thought, emotion, like you said you went through a detox.
Right.
So do you think that's something you would want to talk to people about? Or do you just...
That was only because we were doing such extreme things.
So you think it's a very gentle, more of a gentle, the body just adjusts gently to the treatment?
Oh, yeah. Very rarely do people, she's asking whether people, go through detox and you have to explain that to them. And I'm saying, I don't think I've ever seen anybody yet have a detox reaction. Their immediate reaction is what this lovely lady talked about. Very first reaction is a feeling of warmth. You feel the blood moving up into your head, and then you feel it flowing through your body, and you feel this relaxation. And lots of times you can actually feel a current moving around your system, and you may get little twitches or whatever, but no detox that I've seen, which is great. Yes?
So belief or acceptance plays little role?
Very good question, Howie. Very good question. The question is about the role of belief. you are going to get much better results as somebody doing this if you believe it. But people who doubt get good results too. But the thing is confidence. Anything other than confidence is ego run amok. So it's not good anyway. Oh, I don't think I can do it. You know, it's just reverse ego. Watch out.
From either party or the one, the giver, the healer?
Yeah, as long as the person is given permission to receive the treatment, they can be as skeptical. I mean, this lady that came in 2 days ago in that pain was like, why am I here? Why am I wasting my time? This is idiotic. I have done some very big, very expensive things, and I haven't done anything. Oh, what's that? So I have not seen that. Free will, you can do anything with. We have free will. That's one of the few little perks that we get for being down here. It's gonna be a hell of a game, but you do have free will. Thanks. So you can block it, do you know what I mean, if you really wanted to at that level. But the average human being wants to feel better, wants to be out of pain, wants to elevate to another level. It's just the way that we are. The average person wants to do that.
It sounds like it's more important for the giver to have some level of belief than the receiver.
Yes. It's fairly important for the person to have a confidence. Like when I'm teaching these people this weekend, for instance, a big part of what's going on is that I want them when they go home to be able to pick up this thing and have total confidence that they're going to get some good results. All they have to do is do it. Very, very important. If you were to sit there and go, well, I don't know, I can't see how this. Yeah, I think it would affect your results quite a lot.
Same with emotional issues. Emotional issues will be addressed.
How do you mean emotional issues?
Non-physiological. I mean,
Yeah. But I'm not understanding your question about emotionals. Can you treat them?
yes.
Yes, you can. It's very, very interesting. I'm treating this family of girls in Texas. Started treating her mother for weight loss on the phone, and all her daughters are very heavy, and most of them are addictive personalities. You know, they're into drugs, alcohol, binge eating, all kinds of things. Guys, you know, whatever you can get addicted to. And so it was very interesting because the worst daughter, in the sense the one that was most obvious, because she eats 20 times a day and she does coke and she does, you know, her mother, we treated her on Friday and on Saturday. On Monday morning, her mother phoned me and said, what is this really? And I said, why? She says, well, she's losing weight. You can see it. But she says something else is happening. She's only eating 3 times a day. She's not nasty and attacking everybody. I don't think she's done coke in the last 2 days. And I don't think she's had a drink in the last 2 days. Hypothalamus normalizes the desires. And opening up the cervical 1, cervical 2, along with that, helps to release patterns, you know, rigid patterns, emotional patterns. So not only does she lose weight, you know, her daughter's friendly and nice and doesn't kick the dog every day, and that's a big plus. But yeah, it's used for addictions, emotional problems. One of the things that I found, because I'm pretty open, but you know, I'm a human being, so I have big pockets of skepticism still in there. One of the things that amazed me the most is when Tom went over his treatments of Down syndrome children. Within a year to a year and a half of regular treatment, they're 100% normal. Physically, mentally, emotionally, every way. Good question. What's regular treatment, she asked. I think he said in the beginning, you know, once or twice a week for months, and then once a week for a couple of months and then once a month. But you ought to see the photographs. I mean, you're just like, wow. And people say, well, how can this happen? Because this is genetic, right? But the genetics still have to play through this system. And it can only create the things it creates through the blockages. So if you open up the blockages, even though, you know, there's that genetic blueprint or glitch, if you don't have blockages for it to manifest, it can't manifest. Sort of like the Rolling Stone gathers no moss thing. It's pretty powerful.
Two questions. One is, have you seen any results with autism? Second question is, what about issues that have external elements involved, such as parasites?
Yeah, good question. She's asking whether we've seen results with autism. Big results with autism. Big results. And all the other kind of semi-related things, learning disabilities, hyperactivity, all those things are brain function. Despite the fine gold guys claim about the diet. It's you normalize the brain function and normalize the blockage in the spine. It's remarkable the things that will clear up. Now, so autism, and the other one was?
The other one was when there are external elements such as
Oh, parasites and things, right.
heavy metals, that kind of.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'll find out because that's my territory, is cleaning up the biological terrain. That's what I've been doing for a long time. So I'm kind of watching that, and a lot of people I normally would go through the practice of cleaning out all that stuff. We're just doing the treatments, and I'm watching their blood. So we'll see. I don't know yet. Dr. Tam does not give supplements. He thinks supplements are the biggest curse ever put on the earth. And there's a lot of new research which is starting to suggest he's right.
Joseph, can you speak more about the blood analysis, and have you actually seen blood analysis improvements on patients you've been working on?
Blood analysis, live blood analysis is very tricky. Because we're talking about you prick your finger and you put it on a slide and put it under a microscope so you can see your biological terrain operating. You can see your red and white blood cells and see, yeast, molds, viruses, bacteria, parasites, see whether you're digesting proteins, fats, carbs, sugar, iron, B12, folic acid, all those kind of things. The normal thing that people use to see whether there's an improvement in live blood in things like this is, of course, the old standby of whether the blood's free-flowing or not. And that's very tricky because lots of things that you do, including this, are going to cause some cleansing in the organs and tissues. When the body's got problems and you give it a little bit of help, the first thing it does is go, cool, we've got help, let's clean. And so as the organs and tissues throw out stuff into the blood, it's got to cope with that and it stresses it. So sometimes it looks like it's getting worse when really it's getting better. So it's a tricky thing. On the whole, the one common thing I've seen is the average person who we look at their blood before doing a treatment, it's all gummed up and jammed up. A lot of people, their blood does open up because the relaxation is so deep in the system. And a lot of the agglutination of all the red blood cells is stress and all these other things. And so when you get that deep relaxation going through the body, it opens up. But other than that, it's not as simple as people think to make evaluations using live blood. Yes?
So I know that you're somewhat supplement-oriented in your practice, and I'm wondering how you're interfacing this with your patients moving forward.
The people who have money buy all the supplements. No. It's a great question. Anybody who knows me, who's been in my office over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, will see the availability of supplements getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, especially when I got into Qigong, because the Qigong way is really my model of life. When the energy is flowing through your body in a balanced way, and you're, relating to life and the cosmos, You don't need a special diet. You don't need a special car. You don't need special friends. Don't need a special bed. You know, you may have seen this in China. You see some of the Qigong masters, the old guys, they'll take out their little tin cup out of their bag, scoop water out of the sewer on the side of the road and drink it. And you sort of go, you know, somebody like me who lives under a microscope, I go, hey, I don't think you want to do that. You know? They metabolize it. They just... So not to have to rely on things is a very, very good thing. And so the more that your system is open, and Tom is just very against people being dependent on things. He wants people to get to where energy is sort of all they need. And he does teach a therapy, the Pigu therapy. He's very good at that. And he has some students who have just been on water for 4, 5, 6 months. And they are.
What do you mean?
Yeah, explain.
I'm not telling.
How can you be on water?
Just water.
They're not eating any.
No food.
So what does that mean? Are they absorbing like energy from?
Yes, the fabled breatharian thing, back again. And not everybody can do that. Very few people can do that, but he is very, very good at getting people, you know, into a very special state called a Pigu state. And he's written a book on it. He's written a number of books. His Tom Tam's Healing, a great book on cancer. And if we get his guy here to talk about cancer, I want 500 doctors in there, because what he has to say about cancer rocks the world. So he's written books on all these things.
Several studies have shown that water stores intention.
Stores?
Intention.
Well, sure. Gives being pissed off a whole new meaning, doesn't it?
You're quick.
Yeah, water in our bodies. I mean, water is one of my big things. I also deal with reclaiming water on a bigger scale, lakes, rivers, things like that. Because part of my thing about why people's immune systems are having a hard time is that if you've noticed, we're about the same percentage of water to mass that the Earth is water to mass. And so there's a reciprocal thing going on there. And as the water gets more polluted in the planet, that reverberation starts to affect us. And the Russians have done most of the research on that by taking a bottle of, or a glass of clear, good water and doing all kinds of parameter tests on it, hydrogen angle bonds and all that, and putting, you know, like sewer water next to it and leaving it there for 4 hours. And this one goes down and starts to really malfunction. So yes, I think that the water, his question was about whether the fact that we have all this water and it carries intention, it's, you know, makes your mother's thing about be very nice to everyone you meet have a whole new level of importance. It's very important. All the great Qigong masters of today all say love, forgiveness, kindness. That's what it's about. Because if you aren't operating from that viewpoint, then your heavy biological system is going to start reverberating at that level. So it's very, very important that our intentions are good. Helps the energy flow.
Can you treat yourself?
Yes, you can treat yourself. I treat myself a lot. Tom says that it's better to have somebody else treat you, you know, like get somebody else in your family trained so they can treat you, because the energy exchange through the collective unconscious is a little more powerful. But I don't know, maybe it's just because of my background and my training. I don't have any trouble. I treat myself for whatever and, you know, get good results. So, and he does teach cancer patients who live alone how to treat themselves every day, and they, you know, they have good results. So, okay, time for bed. So thank you very much. I want to read one quick little thing from Dr. Tam, if I can find it here. Tong Ren is not a miracle. Liar. It is not a religious worship, nor is it a mystery. People easily accept the theory that energy forms the universe, but they can't accept the theory that energy forms the human being. If you believe the life force, the human being's energy, which the Chinese call the Qi, and you want to feel it or recognize it, then come to our guinea pig class.
Wow.
So thank you very much. And as I say, anybody who's interested, I'll leave a
RVML Resource Center is a volunteer-operated federal 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organization. RVML is dedicated to providing easy access to a comprehensive collection of information on a variety of metaphysical, spiritual, and personal development subjects. RVML accepts and appreciates all donations. Material and monetary contributions are fully tax-deductible. This recording is not copyrighted, and permission is granted to broadcast, exhibit, or duplicate all or part of this program for non-commercial educational purposes. This live presentation was organized and presented by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. For more information, please visit rvml.org.